So this is the last talk in a series of these weeks on the Eightfold Path of Practice, which was given in the very first Dharma talk of the Buddha, what's called the turning of the wheel of the Dharma or the law, where the Buddha began to give guidance for awakening, how to practice to those around him. And as I said last week, the Eightfold Path is not a linear set of development, one step to another, but it's rather a mandala, a circle with one's own heart and being in the center. And all of the aspects of this practice of the Eightfold Path bring you back to experience yourself and what's true in deeper and deeper levels. We began with right understanding, which is sensing deeply in oneself this potential for awakening and for greater compassion, and sensing that that needs nourishment or opening. And then right attitude or right aspiration, that comes through a process of training and of kindness and of a willingness to discover, a kind of discovery. And right speech and right action and right livelihood, all of the steps that have to do with our activity in the world, the essence of them is to act and speak in ways where we take care with our intention, with what is in our heart as we speak or act, so that creates both a sense of harmony and that it comes from the center of us, of what we most deeply know and value. And then last week on right effort and right mindfulness, the quality of being attentive and balanced and discovering or sensing what is true in the present, being open and aware, the effort to be attentive to what is so. Now, all of these different pieces, the awakening of one's compassion, the discovery of what's true in one's life, the acting from a care with intention and so forth, all are supported and deepened by the last aspect of the Eightfold Path, which is called right concentration. And with it comes also a quality of calm and concentration. Our modern society has almost forgotten about calm. It's almost not in our contemporary vocabulary. As Wes Nisker, who sometimes teaches here, says, we seem to be seeking endless excitement and perfect peace. But there is some problem in that, as you may sense. In the society, we've forgotten the joys of simplicity. The joys of, there's a wonderful book of a woman's journey to the Amish, where she went and spent a year living with Amish families in Middle West and in Pennsylvania, where everything was done by hand, where they used horses instead of cars and things were done by hand. And there was a slowness in the rhythm that she describes in her writing that was so deeply satisfying, because it meant that you were there in a full and present way. Thoreau said, beware of any activity that requires the purchase of new clothing. Right? It's quite up to date, actually, his comment. In our society, we are bombarded with the message that if we gain or collect or do or get or fulfill our desires and our creativity or our intention and get more and do more and be more, that we'll be happier. And what's left out of that message is the wonderful calm and delight of the heart that comes when we don't desire anything, and we're not trying to get anything or accumulate or make or find or fix, but rather when we are at rest. Gandhi used to talk about it a lot. He used to speak about the beauty of monotony. How's that? You haven't heard that recently, huh? The monotony of the sun rising in the morning in the east and setting in the west, the monotony of the phases of the moon, the monotony of the seasons and the planting of seeds of farmers in the springtime. And there is in each of us, and we come back to it sooner or later, a sense of these forgotten rhythms. For 1,000,000 years, we and our ancestors and forebears lived in harmony with the seasons, with calmness, with stillness. It's in the cells of our body. It's in the way we breathe. It's in the way we relate to one another, if we can, when we have village and community. It was in the rhythms of the flute and the music tonight, that sense of rest, of just being there, in rhythm with what presents itself. And as we remember, as we sense this capacity for calm, our body relaxes and our heart softens and opens. In Thailand, in the monasteries where I did the most years of my practice in Asia, it's called simply ease. And ease is a very important word in that culture. Does this create ease, this situation, this person, this practice, this way of being? Does it bring one to ease? A restful heart. And ease is considered an attribute of the wise. Again, you could sense the ease that was offered in the music. A poem from Rilke called The Swan. This clumsy living that moves lumbering as if in ropes through what is not done reminds us of the awkward way the swan walks. And to die, which is a letting go of the ground we stand on and cling to every day, is like the swan when he nervously lets himself down into the water, which receives him gaily and which flows joyfully under and after him, wave after wave, while the swan, unmoving and marvelously calm, is pleased to be carried, each moment more fully grown, more like a king, composed farther and farther on. Using the words of the language of the poem to let the swan rest in the water. Freud said at one point, everywhere I go, everywhere I try to go, a poet has been there before me. He recognized that in language and in music really were the places that he was seeking as well. One of the major differences between Eastern and Western psychology, excuse me, almost sneezed into that. Wake you up. One of the major differences between Eastern and Western psychology, and in a way we work with elements of both here often at Spirit Rock, is that Western psychology, like our culture, has a great deal of energy to investigate and discover and look at and figure out, even to the very deep questions of our own nature and identity. But what's absent, that is the ground of Eastern psychology, is a sense of deep calm and concentration from which one can listen, one can sense, one can understand and inquire on whole new levels of our being that aren't there when you're simply asking a question at your normal freeway speed. I mean, I notice it when I work as a psychologist and have people come into therapy for 50 minutes or an hour. The first half of the time is simply slowing down and getting off the freeway and getting in touch enough with one's body and feelings to begin to look at what's going on. We all need periods of calm, time to connect with ourselves. It's incredibly important and nourishing. And you can find them in little ways in your daily life. You can awaken this quality. You can do it by driving without having the radio on, or not listening to some tape or something. You can do it by, when you walk, instead of thinking about all the things you'll do when you get to that place that you're walking to, whether it's the grocery store or the office or someone you're going to visit, by walking and feeling your body and your steps and just Being there for a little while, just in the present, calmly with each step. You can do it when you cook. There's ways to cook to try and get it all done so you get it out on the table. We've all cooked in that way. Or you can just enjoy the cooking and just do it for its own sake. Or you can take walks in the rain with or without an umbrella, and look at the spring flowers that are out in so many places. And look at the clouds we get from these storms. It's just to take time every day to connect with your heartbeat and your rhythms and your body and that still small voice inside that knows a lot but is often lost in our busyness. Kabir writes again as a poet, "I don't know what kind of a God we've been talking about. The caller chants in a loud voice at dusk. Does he think that God is deaf? Don't you know that God hears the ringing of the anklets on the feet of an insect as it walks?" Just that sense of listening, of delicacy. Now this quality of calm, discovering this, nourishing it in our life, supports is an aspect of the awakening of this step of right concentration. Concentration is our capacity to be steady, to be absorbed, to be present without distraction, to be whole, connected, unified. And this concentration is central in all great arts. It's central in music. To play music, you really have to be present as you do. It's central in computer programming, to really notice and be there in a steady way, or in nursing, or in lovemaking, or sailing, or commodities trading. It doesn't matter. Any art that one takes, raising children, all of it, the extent to which we can bring a steadiness and non-distractedness and wholeness of our being, whether it's to our children or our computer screen or our music, all of it flourishes by that capacity. It is also a key to the contemplative or the spiritual arts. Why is this so? Jesus said, "If thine eye be single, the whole body will be filled with light." And William James said, "We live in a single, limited state of consciousness, while all around us lie infinite varieties of consciousness, separated from us by the thinnest veils." We are trapped in what Alan Watts called a skin-encapsulated ego. You may have noticed that during your day today. And yet, we all do, that there are deeper ways of knowing than the busyness of our activities and the busyness of our thoughts. If thine eye be single, if we can really see in a concentrated way. Concentration, steadiness, this wholeness, is what shifts our sense of who we are. It shifts the whole fabric of our identity. Now it's true, there are a variety of things that bring this sense of concentration. Sometimes it comes during an accident. All of a sudden you have to pay attention, and whole new things are opened in front of your eyes. A near-death experience, or some great loss that happens, and you pay attention, and the whole world of birth and death begins to teach you in a way that's not normally revealed. Sometimes, if you're lucky, it happens during sex. I think that's one of the reasons that we're drawn to it, beside the pleasure itself, is the sense of concentration and surrender when it's good, where you really let go of that small sense of yourself, a kind of natural concentration. Sometimes it comes hiking in the Sierras, when you've kind of gone up in the mountains, especially going up one of the high peaks, and you're step after step, and you're just focusing on that, and all of a sudden you turn around after being that focused, and there's this huge, beautiful blue sky in the space in front of you. For a lot of years, People have used different psychedelic substances to concentrate, to bring that steadiness, that wholeness. But the point is not particularly the drugs, but the steadiness, the presentness that comes. When asked whether he took drugs, Salvador Dali said, "I do not take drugs, I am drugs." And that's really what we're looking for, yes? Now this is the art of concentration. And there are 1,000 ways in spiritual practices around the world to develop it. Working with the breath, as we do here, working with prayer that's recited, or mantra and sacred words, visualizations, candle flames, feeling certain feelings like the loving kindness meditation, repeating over and over again. Fasting and initiations that involve repetition. Native American practices where you roll one little stone around a big one and say a particular prayer as you do it over and over. There are 1,000 ways to do it. The main art, like any great art, music, painting, is to do it over and over and over again, to surrender yourself to it in order to learn it, to develop it. I remember walking along the banks of the Ganges in Benares at one point, being drawn to a big, beautiful Krishna temple there, from all the sound of chanting and music, and walking inside. And it was a Krishna Bhakti devotional festival that had been happening, and there was a crew of people there who had been chanting and singing to Krishna for 7 days and nights without stop, walking around the center of the temple. And there were people playing cymbals and various other kinds of instruments, and kind of a supportive cast of crowds around who were coming and going and kind of adding energy. But I went in there, and it was the most extraordinary state these people were in. It was like there was no top to the temple. It had been blown off somehow. It was this very powerful energy, and they were just circling and singing, and they had so surrendered to that there was a sense that they had lost completely their everyday identity of themselves. Over and over again is the art. To sense inside, which we can, whatever discipline or practice or art we take, that we do it until all the thoughts and plans and distractions for the past and future begin to drop away, doing it again and again, until we find ourselves fully present, able to rest in the present. To concentrate, to be that whole, to find that kind of peace, requires a certain purity of heart in most cases. It requires a kind of forgiveness and trust. This is what I mean by purity of heart. If you can't forgive while you're sitting following your breath or doing a visualization or playing music, your mind will keep going what they did wrong and what's unfinished in the past. Or if you can't trust, your mind will keep worrying and planning and imagining and trying to solve things. To really be able to concentrate and find that calm in the cells of our body, in our being, requires forgiveness, a letting go of the past, and requires a trust, a letting go of the future. Now it's interesting for us to begin to observe what happens as we try to concentrate, in meditation especially, working with the breath or visualization or loving kindness or candle or whatever. At first it's often quite difficult, I'm sure you've noticed. And sometimes the harder we try, the more difficult it is. Thoughts come, plans come, fears, reactions, distraction, all the body tension that we have, unfinished business in our memory. When you say to your mind, stay on the breath, does it listen? No, that's very clear. Or stay on this feeling or this image. Instead, what happens is you place it, you direct it somewhere, and almost immediately you encounter the force of habit and contraction that I've called the body of fear. The strength of the habits that we're involved in of past and future and planning and remembering that keep us from the present. You encounter the force of that small and frightened sense of self. I remember someone asking my teacher whether meditation wasn't kind of like self-hypnosis. And he said, actually, it's more like de-hypnosis. That normally we're hypnotized by the events of life caught in each one, caught by praise and caught by blame, caught by gain and caught by loss, and caught by pleasure and caught by pain, involved trying to fix it and make and get, kind of business as usual. To concentrate is to step out of that game, out of that whole perspective of consciousness, and let go, not by struggling with it or trying to get it to stop, but simply relaxing, a kind of ease or grace, returning back to feel your breath again, returning to feel the feeling that's present, returning again to listen to the music. Remember, we talk in the beginning classes about training the puppy, just bringing the puppy back, stay, again and again 1,000 times, back to the breath. Could you sense it listening to the music, how you'd hear the music, and sometimes you can surrender to it, and then all of a sudden you'd realize that you'd gone back to work, and there was all that stuff, and I'm missing the music. And then you let go of that, and you come back, and you pick up again just in the present with that movement that is there. It's like steadying the canoe. If you learn to paddle a canoe, especially in rough waters, it's finding this way to soften and drop into your body and into the moment. Return to the center. There's a relaxation, a connection, a kind of balance quality. And in interest, you have to pay attention. Listening to the music is like entering the stream, entering the river. Now gradually we can learn this. There are times and places already in your life that you know this. This is a part of your being. So what we do in spiritual practice is to re-evoke, reawaken this, to remind ourselves that we can live more in this way. To do so is really to learn to swim, to let go, to float. To remember that just when you learned to swim, when perhaps you were a child and you took swimming lessons or whatever, or played in the water, and for a long time you're worried that the water won't hold you up, and you flail your arms around and you let go for a second and then you do it again because you really don't believe it. Doesn't feel like you're not going to sink. To learn to concentrate is very much a parallel to that. It feels like if you let go of your thoughts and your plans and your usual identity, that you don't know who you'll be. What will you do? But actually we do it all the time in little moments and we haven't noticed it. You do it when you go to sleep, and it's pretty sweet, isn't it? Actually, it's quite sweet. And so what this takes is bringing consciousness to it, to learn to let go and trust that you can feel your body or your breath wherever you are, and float and rest in the moment. As the capacity for consciousness, for concentration, for paying attention and being steady grows, what one finds is the heart and mind become pliant or malleable. That is to say, you can say, stay on the breath, and it rests on the breath. You can direct your attention to feel your body, and it stays in the body. You can direct your attention to the music, and you can stay with the music. There's a sense of steadiness, of integration that grows through the practice of concentration, through the cultivation of it. And as we do it over and over, mastering or working with this art, consciousness, the mind itself, begins to become pure or clear. And the whole body becomes filled with energy and yet very still. If you can sense those two being there at the same time, you know it from times in your life. We all do. Who doesn't know what it's like to have moments where you're sitting and you're relaxed and very present at the same time? alive but not reacting to anything. Or when you're walking and you're just being present as you do. As it deepens, certainly true in meditation, and one becomes more and more attentive to the breath, more and more surrendered to what one is paying attention to, there begins to arise physically a sense of lightness, and then literally a sense of light. The body can fill with light. As I said, again, that phrase from Jesus, if thine eye be single, the whole body will be filled with light. This isn't a metaphor, but it's really quite literal. It happens in 100 different kinds of meditation practices or inner contemplative disciplines. When you become concentrated and steady and really connected with whatever you're paying attention to, so the mind is pure, which means pure in the sense it's not distracted or worried or caught up, it's just there resting, then the body and mind fill with light. And at first it can be a shock, especially if you're sitting and it's dark. You kind of open your eyes and say, who's shining the light on me? Or where's this light coming from? And it can get stronger, clouds or sunlight, or it can feel like the whole body, every cell, has light shining out of it. As concentration deepens, there comes a happiness that grows to a greater sense of joy in the stillness, in the presentness. There's a tremendous joy in concentration because we're not worried, we're not caught up, we're not lost, we're not in conflict. In the moments when we're concentrated, again, this is like those moments in making love, or those moments when you're really connected with the music, or those moments where you're really connected with your breath. In those moments, there's this tremendous sense of well-being, and a wonderful sense of rapture can arise. Your whole body and heart and mind can feel like it's washed clean, like you've been put through the washing machine with a lot of Tide or something like that, and come out and hung in the spring sunshine, and things just sparkle like crystals. This is literal again, it's not just metaphorical, but it feels that way inside. And then, as one learns to strengthen or awaken or discover this capacity for presence, concentration, steadiness, things begin to become clear, like the clear mountain air, the whole workings of the body and of the mind. And this is what mystics and visionaries and the Buddha himself taught over and over. When you become calm and restful and attentive and concentrated, then pay attention and see what is true about this life. Concentration, when directed in a fine or focused way, becomes like a microscope, and it dissolves what is called santati. Santati is the illusion of permanence. What happens when you direct concentration steadily, it's as if you could look at the movie screen so carefully that instead of seeing the movie, you see that there are 35 still frames a second being projected on there. And you actually can do that. We did an experiment during a 3-month retreat in Barrie some years ago that I taught with some friends who were psychologists at Harvard. And they brought a machine called a tachistoscope, which measures very short flashes of light and whether you can see them. You kind of look into this thing. And so they took all the students, or a group of students at the beginning, and they had them look in and showed very short flashes of light, like 1,000th of a second, and kept making them shorter and shorter until they said, we can't see it anymore. And this was the baseline, and it's true in research psychology all around the world. That was as short a thing as people could ever see. And then these people spent 3 months in silence, sitting and walking and being aware of their breath and body and mind as one does in meditation. And then they were brought back to the tachistoscope to look into it, and the light was shown again. 1,000th of a second, piece of cake. 10,000th of a second, quite possible. It shocked these guys from Harvard. Wait, nobody in the world has ever done this. 20,000th of a second. It's actually possible, when we're really present, to look so deeply that what seems to be a solid body and feelings and story, the more deeply we pay attention, it turns into vibrations and movements and momentary thoughts and perceptions and sounds and tingles. It becomes cellular wherever you look, as if the microscope were showing, instead of a solid body, a moving field of energy, a stream of physical sensations and emotions and thoughts, which is the truth. It's what we are, but we don't usually see it because we're too glued to the screen trying to figure out what he or she is going to do next in the plot. And we don't realize we live in a river and it's ungraspable. It is a stream. Or if concentration is turned another way, directed like a telescope to expand consciousness, then the mind can open like sky and the whole sense of boundaries of the body dissolve, and one can enter states of tremendous silence, of peace, of great joy, of well-being. A stream. Depending what particular direction or exercise we use with concentration, it's as if we can switch channels and tune into consciousness, as William James said, all these other levels. It's as if, in this room there are presently 138 TV channels being broadcast down by the satellites, and hundreds of radio stations. And it's as if when you begin to concentrate, you get this tuner tuned, and you can tune into any of those channels. So that at times you have states of consciousness that are filled with light, and other times you feel like you're an animal, and at other times you turn into the consciousness of great religions of the past and have visions of temples and ceremonies and images of birth and death and levels of consciousness of universal love. All of these are there. The whole dance of consciousness is here now within us. It's what we're made of. And when we become still and calm and awake, in a very deep way, we can sense how we are connected with it all. We can come, as T.S. Eliot said, to the still point, to that place in the center of the dance. At the still point of the turning world, neither from nor towards, at the still point there the dance is, where past and future are gathered, neither movement from nor towards, neither ascent nor decline. Except for the point, the still point, there would be no dance, and there is only the dance. I can only say there we have been, but I cannot say where or for how long, for that is to place it in time. To concentrate is to come to that still point, to that place in the center of our being. In that, the sense of ourself begins to open or dissolve. And this is what the Buddha discovered in his enlightenment. It's what made him so happy. As Kalu Rinpoche says, Tibetan Lama, wonderful yogi, he says, you live in illusion and the appearance of things. There is a reality, but you do not know this. When you understand, you will see that you are nothing. And being nothing, you are everything. That is all. This is the reality that opens up when we become still enough. When you see clearly, you will discover that you are nothing, that the sense of separateness of self starts to dissolve in body and mind, just to be thoughts and waves and movement like a cloud. And being nothing, you are everything. In sensing this quite directly, and we can do it, we do it in moments in our life, in opening ourselves to know or receive in that way, there comes a sense of that which is sacred or divine. The movement of stars is the same substance of our own lives. It's not far away. It's not just on some 3-month retreat or some 3-year retreat in the Himalayas as a yogi. But it can be discovered in each of our lives with simplicity, with calm, with a focus of attention, with a deep kind of listening. It's here for us. It's true all the time. I mean, you read those books like Raymond Moody's of people's near-death experiences, and they pretty much all say the same thing. Wow, it was amazing. It turned out that it was all light. It was quite a show. And then I came back and I had to pretend I was George again for another 20 years or whatever, and that was all right. But I now know that it's not quite how it seems. The enlightenment of the Buddha, the awakening of the Buddha, is not about piety or becoming good. Saves you that trouble. Yeah? But of a transformation of our identity from this sense of small, limited self-consciousness and all the sorrow and struggle that being identified with a small, limited sense of consciousness creates. A shift from that to discover in our life that which is timeless, that which brings us freedom and awakening in the center of our heart and our being. Again from that book, Children's Letters. Dear God, are you real? Some people do not believe it. If you are, you better do something quick. Harriet. Thomas Merton answers that letter in his own way. He says, life is this simple. We are living in a world that is absolutely transparent, and the divine is shining through it all the time. This is not just a fable, it is true. We are living in a world that is absolutely transparent, and the divine is shining through it all the time. This is not just a fable, it is true. To concentrate, to be present in that way, is what allows us to reawaken to that truth that we know in us somewhere. Here's a meditation, simple one. Reflect or perceive that you are not yet born, that you are in the womb, that you are young, that you are old, that you have died, that you are in the world beyond the grave. Sense in your mind and heart all this at once, all these times and places, before birth, birth, your life, death, and after, all substances, all qualities, all magnitudes together. When you sense them just here and now, you will apprehend the divine. This is called the deathless, freedom of the deathless. And it's our home. It's where we come from or who we are. And everything else is like Monopoly. Remember from last week? Pretty soon you have to turn in Boardwalk or Park Place or, Ventnor Avenue or whatever you've collected, however many houses and hotels, and give it all in at the end of the game. Can you find a place where you neither move forward, nor backward, nor stand still? So the Eightfold Path, the path of practice that again I've called the mandala, ends in this quality of concentration, of calm, of steadiness, of all the things that are nourished, wakefulness and connectedness with ourselves in our speech and action, sensing this potential of compassion and knowing. It ends in this as a place that we return to in our being, to discover, to fulfill, to rest in a kind of graciousness and ease, to know who we really are. I read to you from Shantideva, who was one of the wonderful great masters to follow the Buddha in India. The miracle of illumination, it's called. As a blind person feels when they find a pearl in a dustbin, so I am amazed by the miracle of the birth of Buddha rising within my own heart. It is the nectar of immortality that delivers us from death. The treasure that lifts us above poverty into the wealth of giving. The tree that gives shade to us when we roam about scorched by life. The bridge that takes us across the stormy river. The cool moon of compassion that calms our heart when it is agitated. The sun that dispels darkness. The butter made from the milk of kindness by churning it with the Dharma. It offers us a feast of joy to which we are all invited. Let your eyes close for a minute if you would. Just sit and rest. Letting yourself breathe, be present, concentrate, surrender. Resting in the present. Remember now for a moment, sometime when you really opened to this mystery, when the small sense of yourself dissolved like a bubble, when you knew something that was timeless. Remember how that felt, that place of openness and wholeness, presence. And sense what you could do to nourish that, to bring that alive in your life. That opening and understanding. To bring the calm and wholeness. What could you do to nourish that? Why not begin that this week? One of the things that happens as one develops a spiritual practice or works with a contemplative life is that you discover that it's not just done in a little portion of time that you sit in meditation, if you do that periodically, or when you go off to retreat, that it begins to change your life, and that actually it demands that your life be changed, not because you're supposed to, or because anyone else cares whether you do, but you begin to sense that you can't live any other way, that you need to find time of calm, that you need to nourish that sense of steadiness, that our heart and our being requires in some way us to take the time to connect with this other reality. And you start to say to yourself, how am I going to change? What will I do to make myself live from that place. Ah, how nice. How sweet. So let's sit again for a moment. Let yourself rest and be as calm as you can. Relaxed, present. As you do, notice also what keeps you from calm. Without any judgment, notice what interferes, what thoughts, what holding, what sensations. And see if you can touch them with compassion, to include them in your softening, in your presence. Not to make them go away, but to hold them with compassion. So those too come into your state of calm and presence. And then let's chant together the simple sound of opening or letting go, ah, enjoying the sound as you make it, resting in it. Ah.